So if you haven't noticed, if you're a church member here, you're blessed. You really are. We have a great church. We have a very loving church. You don't believe us? Go visit some other churches and then come back here. It's good to be here. But how did this church start? Where did it come from? You know, this was a field not too long ago, right? Literally a field, just like the one next door. So as we look at all the different things about our church, I wanted to explain something today. In 1999, the foundation of the Nixa Seventh-day Adventist Church was laid. It was actually laid at Oak Grove Heights. Despite the initial enthusiasm, they faced challenges in securing a location because nobody was willing to rent to them. Determined to move forward, they gathered about 30 people that were interested to propose the church to the conference at the Oak Grove Church. And Elder Brown was there. He was the conference president at that time. And he didn't like the idea. But it's okay. Their proposal was rejected at a time, well, the group was kind of disheartened, but, they weren't deterred. They felt Nixa being rapidly growing community in Missouri. They thought this would be the perfect location. Just the perfect one. Sorry if Ron gets a little excited up front. You've been here a while. They were undaunted by the conference's initial rejection. Ron Harper, a group of others that were inspired, successfully independent church plant, right? They looked at the East Coast, and there was one that went against all the odds on the East Coast, and it was successful, so it kind of inspired them a little bit. And they decided to proceed kind of on their own, and they just jumped out in faith. The decision was solidified as, a unanimous vote by all 14 members that were left. 14. They overcome the obstacle. They overcome one obstacle after another. They finally got a place to rent. They led them to a pastor by the name of Pastor Bob, and he was at the General Baptist Church here in Nixa. They agreed to rent to him for a whole $50 a week. $50 a week so they could get their church started. The small but determined group held their first service on June 20th, 1999. When I stop and I think about all this, I think in June we should probably, social committee or somebody, we should be planning something for the birthday of this church, because this church, if you stop and think about where they started and where we're going, it is amazing. It marked their first official establishment of the Nixa Seventh-day Adventist Church. And despite, not being officially recognized by the conference, they persevered, demonstrating their presence in the community, their commitment to the community. And they gradually laid all the groundwork for what would grow into a thriving church right here in this community. 1 Samuel tells us in chapter 7, or verse 12, it says, "Then Samuel took a stone and he set it between Mizpah and Shen. He named it Ebenezer, saying, 'Thus far the Lord has helped us.'" I'm sure there's an Ebenezer stone somewhere in this church. In 2021, the Nixa Seventh-day Adventist Church was recognized by the conference, and they gave them company status. They were on their way. In 2002, they were finally given a pastor, and we had him here, Pastor Dan Kaffenberger. And, Pastor Dan, he was a pastor of all 33 members of the Nixa Church. In 2003, there were 40 members. They really grew. And in January 2005, need to make that clear, they finally started building. They broke ground in December of 04, but I don't know. Missouri weather, I don't know how you got it accomplished. Some of you will find this interesting. Gennady will enjoy this because now you know where everything is in this church. But it's amazing when we look at it. Today is a special day. It's a day to remember. It's a day to celebrate. It's been over 20 years since this church building, this building, was established right here in Nixa. The very church that you're sitting in. You realize that wasn't that long ago. 20 years of worship, 20 years of ministry, 20 years of God's faithfulness. And as we reflect on this milestone, we're reminded by the words of the prophet Samuel. After God gave Israel a great victory, Samuel set that stone up. And he called it Ebenezer, which means stone of help. And he declared, thus far the Lord has helped us. Knowing where this church started as being rejected by the conference and where it is now is truly a miracle. I believe it's a God-led church, and God had, if Ron and the group would have known back then that this was going to be a multicultural church and we would come together in this day the way we have, it'd have been amazing. But to look back is amazing, right, Ron? God blessed. This day, we need to look back. Because that day when they broke ground, they set up their Ebenezer knowing that it is by God's grace they'd come that far. But they kept going. So, one, let us take for a moment and reflect, on how God has led these 20 years. And God's been very clear in this church. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2, Moses reminds the Israelites to remember how the Lord your God led you the way in the wilderness. You realize how many ups and downs this church has had? I preached in this church 16 years ago. It was pretty new. As a matter of fact, we'll see it here in a minute, but it was smaller when I preached here. And then I came back a year and a half later and it was bigger. But this church struggled. It struggled with the congregation. It struggled with meeting the church budget. It struggled in a lot of different ways. But it persevered because God was behind it. God had a vision. Likewise, we have to remember how God led to establish this church. How a group of faithful believers came together. They were united in prayer. They were united in purpose. There were sacrifices that were made. If you look in those pictures, those are church members giving their time, giving their money. So there were sacrifices that were made both financially, both spiritually, and they laid the entire foundation for what we sit in now. Not just the building, but the church itself. I invite you to take the time and look back on all the challenges they faced, how God provided. And like I said, in June, I want to have a big moment when we celebrate the birthday of this church. Because I believe this church isn't done growing. I don't believe God's done doing great work in this church. Whether back then it was whether through the unexpected donations that happened, permits that came through just in the nick of time to continue on, or the hands of many volunteers, God's hand was evident in every step that they went through. We're getting ready to go through that again if you haven't. There's a field over there that's got your name on it. We can't forget to share these testimonies, for they remind us of the future generations that God is faithful to us. While today is a day of reflection, it's also a day of recommitment. Jesus said in Matthew 28, 19 through 20, and it's very clear, "Go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations." They picked that gauntlet up and they ran with it. They understood. The church isn't merely a building. It is a mission outpost. When you walk out those doors and you go out to your homes, wherever they might be, it is a mission outpost. And over the years, this place has been a beacon of light in Nixa, whether it realized it or not. Here the gospel was preached. Here lives church members that their lives have been transformed. Here the community, well, it has been served. And they began with just 14. Here we are over 20 years later with an average attendance of over 150. It's amazing. But we don't stop there. We reach out across the internet now because of the little cameras we got here and there. We reach out, and because of the team that God's brought together. And if you don't think God's not moving a team together, to be able to have the media team that you have is a very special thing. And God has moved there. Every month we reach over 300,000 souls. It's a lot more than 14. You know what? We're looking to triple that in the next few months. You're reaching people here on earth that you're not ever going to meet here on earth. You're doing that. Through donations, through support, through being here, you're doing that. You're going to get to the kingdom of heaven and say, "Oh, you're from that Nixa church. Yeah, that's why I became a Christian. That's how I got to know Jesus." They're going to be able to say that, and you're going to say, "That was my church. We did that." You know, there's a great song that says that. Oh, what a day that'll be. The mission's not complete. It's one thing to see everything here. See that we have a really nice sound system. We got TVs everywhere. We got all these things happening. Because it started with 14 people that had a dream. So I challenge each one of us. How will we continue on this mission? How are we going to move forward? How are we going to continue to grow what we have? How can we ensure that this church remains a place where the gospel is lived out in lives for the next 20 years, the next 40 years? How do we do that? And it starts with each one of us, not just one or two of us. It's going to start with each one of us committed to being the hands on the feet of Jesus here in this community. Whether it's a health fair outreach, whether it's the Messiah Mansion that we're bringing in, whether it's going door to door and handing out great controversies, it's going to be up to each one of us. You know, maybe you can't go out to the doors, but you can pray. And you become part of it by the prayer because you empower God to move in a way that normally he could not move. As we look into the future, we take comfort in the promises Christ gave us. In Philippians 1:6, it says, "Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it out on to completion until the day Christ comes. Something to think about. Christ promised that he would continue the good work. It's a promise that those 14 gathered. Those 14 gathered together and they said, you know what? God's going to lead us. He's going to guide us. He's going to hold this all together. They had faith. Today we sit here and I pray that each one of you have the same faith. Not only we sit in a church that's able to reach, 300,000 souls. Can you imagine that? And you're meeting them where they're at. Whether it's through our media presence or whether it's through our Bible study presence or whether it's going to be through our great controversies that you guys will hand out or it's going to be just the ones that come to the Messiah Mansion and they gain an education that makes them think, I need to know Jesus better in my life. Maybe it makes them realize they need to make that commitment. And it's all because there was an Ebenezer stone laid and God rewarded a faithful people. God knew where it was going and God knew that he could use it all the way there. So the same God who guided those 20 people or 14 people plus for the last 20 years, he's going to lead us into the future. But we got to be willing to follow. And that means we've got to pray for some wisdom because we have a lot of things to do. We have to have wisdom in investing in the next generation. Staying united as a church family and moving forward in God's mission. It's only through a united family that we are able to gain that. When you just see the disciples move out, they gained an entire church movement because they were all together in heart and mind. We are building not just for today, but we're building for tomorrow as well. We think of the seeds that we have planted in the past, the seeds that we're planting right now, the small acts of faith that happen, the service that happens, and the harvest that came year after year after year, and the harvest that will come from this year to the next year to the next year. And I guarantee you there will be a harvest. So we have to trust God that he's going to use each one of our efforts. And he's going to use our efforts to expand his kingdom. And finally, we must build an Ebenezer of praise. Psalms 100 verse 4 says that enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise and give thanks to him and praise his name. That's what we do here. Today, we offer that praise. We offer thanksgiving because look at everything that God's done. Most of us weren't here when they planted the Ebenezer stone. Most of us haven't been here for the last 20 years. Some of you have been around for a while. If God was that faithful to this little bitty church then, how faithful do you think he's going to be to us and the future? God has great things planned because God's coming. And he's coming very soon. I think this is our year to shine. And I wanted to share this with you because this is just 20 years. Do you realize what's about to happen to this church between now and June? This church is not only going to reach a couple thousand people with doors at their doors with the Great Controversy Project, but we're estimating about 10,000 plus for the Messiah Mansion. 10,000 just for the Messiah Mansion. And it expands our online Bible course because everywhere the Messiah Mansion goes, guess what? They're going to lock into our Bible study course because we're supporting and pushing the final Bible study at the end of the mansion. You'll come to your last station in the mansion, you'll shoot a QR code, and it's going to take you to a sanctuary study. And when you finish that sanctuary study, guess what? You're going to move into the study that we have online. Amen. You're going to change lives that you're never going to meet again here on earth. but you'll meet them in heaven one day. So let us also be thankful to all the individuals who have been instrumental in this church's journey so far. Let's be thankful for all those that God's going to use in the journey into the future. But we look back at all the pastors, to the volunteers, to the elders, to the youth. Each contributed a little part into this story. Whether they were just the prayer warriors, whether they were ones raking the gravel, whether they were putting up the sheetrock. Most importantly, let us dedicate ourselves to God's new work that he's doing today. Be glad this church has expanded. Fellowships would be horrible in a small church. When we stop and we look at what God can do with just a little bit of faith, what do you think he can do with great faith? We're moving there. I wanted to share this with you because between now and June, you're going to see God move, I think, in a way that you're probably not really prepared for. And it's going to be great. You're going to be able to see people moved to have a relationship with Jesus Christ that they've never understood before. And it's going to be because you prayed. It's going to be because the church was built. It's going to be because you contributed in some way. Whether it was running up to that uncomfortable moment to hang the thing on the door and pray they don't come out and talk to you. But when you stop and think about it, each little piece God uses. And this summer, I think you're going to find that God has used you in ways that you don't even recognize. You know, God can use us whether we're trying to be used or whether we're oblivious to it. May this church continue to be a place where his name's glorified and where his love is shared not just with each one of us, but we share it with the community. And not only the community that we see and we drive through every day, but the community that watches us online. The community that wants to be part of something that we share with them. And I pray that community finds a relationship with Christ. And when Jesus comes, you're standing in heaven going, wow, how did you get here? Well, you donated $1. And I seen a video, and here I am. You're going to find people in heaven that way. And I pray that you'll be blessed for all eternity. Amen.